Well, thank you, Kelly. Thank you, and I agree with you. I'm not going to sit here and begin to contest those figures, figures that were read out as at 2025. And I think it's also correct that the country has actually given very little attention to industrialization, and that in itself has been unfortunate. And it's the impact of all of that lack of attention, that we are now suffering from. But let me say that the government of President Bola Ahmed Tinubu GCFR has actually taken a different direction. After 1 year or thereabout, in which what the government had was a minister of industry, trade and investment, the president came up with a novel in the Ministry of Industry, Trade and Investment, in which you had two ministers. But unlike previous times where you had two ministers, you had a minister of state. What the president did was have a minister of Trade and Investment in the Ministry of Industry, Trade and Investment, and have a Minister of State for Industry. And I think for the first time, it now brought out, to the open, industry. And I like to say, for example, that the fact that we have an Nigerian industrial policy now is a testament to what that, that kind of innovation in that ministry, on the ministry has been able to achieve. Prior, like I said, the NIP that we have is the first policy document that we have in decades. And I'm not going to sit here and talk about the fact of where we were and as sad as it is. I'm going to talk about the progress that we've tried to make. Since after the 2025 analysis and evaluation, we've long had a policy in place. Not just a policy, we have an industrial framework that I believe that for every passing moment, every passing day, is going to continue to get us to make progress on most of those causes that we've talked about. The Nigerian industrial policy highlights all of these challenges and hopes that we should be able to make progress on the different dimensions. And not because the challenges will no longer be there. The aspiration of the policy is that by 2030, industry's contribution to GDP should rise to about 25%. And I think that for every nation that is classified as an industrial nation, the manufacturer's contribution to GDP is upwards, is in the double digits. And I think that what we try to do is to see how much progress we can make in the course of implementing the policy, and we've tried to activate various, value chain and value addition, mechanisms. Just about, a few weeks ago, we convened, what I call the Cocoa Value Addition Summit that brought, together, cocoa producing countries, about 4, Ghana, Cote d'Ivoire, Cameroon, Nigeria, and the European Union, and all of that. And the hallmark of that session was about, the fact that we spent too much time and too much effort always exporting our raw materials. We need to develop them. We need to see how we can add value, because that is going to be the only way that we can make progress and can make development. So, it's manufacturing's contribution, as at first quarter of this year, was about, close to about 3.29, the highest, in 4 years, not where we think we should be, but I think that it shows a trend, it shows, not unlike a boom that comes and goes. It means, for example, that, we are in the right direction, and we're going to continue to make progress on that. By the time, everything, sometime again, this year, the president, extended the ban on Shea nut. The country produces, about more than 40% of the world's Shea nut production. And, the value in terms of value addition that we retain is very minimal, if at all. So all of these, policy decisions, all of these decisions that have been taken are intended to tackle in the main most of those challenges, and all of that. Are we where we should be? No. Are we, in the right direction? I think that, very optimistically, yes, and hope that the recognition of industry and its role in terms of the progress that we expect to make can only continue to add and to get us to solve all of those, constraints and all of those statistics, Kelly, that you've read out.